Some of the things that I find very fascinating is the paradoxes of actual time travel. So you think about the movie Back to the Future. What was the H.G. Wells one that I mentioned earlier?
Oh, Time Machine.
Yeah, Time Machine. Yeah,
Even Butterfly Effect.
Butterfly Effect. There's another one.
Yeah.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
I was gonna say, there's proof that it exists right there. It's been documented.
Yeah.
Ask Mr. Bill and Mr. Ted.
Yeah, yeah. But I love those types of movies. Even actually, there are different shows that are like TV shows that it drives me crazy because then there might be, we'll just say the Avengers, right, where they use time travel in order to go back and defeat the whatever that guy's
when
name
I see
was.
that, it's like that's just a not fair button, or you just want to be able to tell both sides of the story.
Right.
Come on, that's not fair.
Yeah, sometimes it's used in such a way. Go, oh come on, that's not fair. But I love the Back to the Future series, the concept of being able to go back in time, and then having that paradox of what was Michael J. Fox's character?
Oh my
Marty.
goodness. Marty.
Yeah.
Mr.
So
McFly.
that's right, Mr. McFly. So he goes back in time, and of course he meets his parents, and he screws up by pushing his dad out of the way of the car.
Right.
And that was the trigger.
Butterfly effect.
Yeah, that was the trigger to get his parents to meet, and was her name Lorraine to fall in love because she was taking care of him and all this. It turns out Marty's the one that gets hit by the car.
But to find out though, I mean the fun twist to it, a fun show like that, because there's some depth to that show, is that's how they always met.
Yeah,
that's not how it was. Maybe his parents met. That he didn't accidentally change how they met. That's probably how they always have met.
Oh, see, this is where
because
my mind starts.
He didn't go back. He didn't go back and accidentally change things, screw up. He went back and created what was going to happen. How it happened. That's just the only way it was supposed to happen.
Yeah,
I don't know. You know what I mean?
I do, and this is an area that it makes you wonder, because there is this paradox of going back in time, and that. But because you're watching the movie, that it works out in the end because they still do get together. Well, because that happened, that's the way it always happened.
Right. It's kind of the Matrix deal. Like when he comes over and I'm sorry, I can't even remember what he knocked over, the vase or something.
Yeah.
He knocks over the vase because she said, hey, watch out or something. And then she's like, well, now you're going to wonder if you knocked it over because I said something.
Yeah, right.
And you're like,
yeah. Oh. So there's this, let me see, what is it called? Okay, it's called the grandfather paradox.
Okay.
Does that sound familiar at all? So the grandfather paradox is kind of what we're talking about, where you think about if you were to go back in time and kill your grandfather, then that would eliminate you being born,
right, and everything in the wake of my life,
right. And so exactly, and so the grandfather paradox is, of course, well, what if you do go back in time, right? And so this is sort of one of those brain games. You go back in time and you attempt to kill your grandfather, but are unable to, and you keep going back in time and trying to repeat, and every single time you make the attempt, something prevents you from it happening. So there's a different sort of force that is at play.
Right. Like it's keeping you from being able to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like there's more of a purpose.
Yeah.
You can't change the powers that be. In
right.
fact, you're not where you belong.
So there's a third one too. So the first one is going back and actually being able to change and, impact, like the Marty McFly story. And then the other is not being able to, like the grandfather paradox. And then the third, and I want to say it's Brian Greene. I think he's a theoretical physicist, really brilliant guy. He talks about, well, maybe going back in time and influencing one of those things, somehow by that you are going back into time to we'll just say that it's the same, it's a copy of that experience. So when you go back into time, you're no longer actually going back to the same timeline. You're going to another timeline that's identical. And now the future of that other timeline has a different future.
So you're talking like parallel.
There you go.
Parallel instead of going parallel universes instead of going back and forth, right?
Yeah.
So you accidentally jump onto the next train that's going that direction and screw with that thing and jump back. You know?
Exactly.
But
exactly. It kind of blows your mind to think about the potential options here. I mean, because right now we don't, of course, have time travel that we know of.
Right. Well, because time for me, it is a little bit rough because this isn't. How do I say it? It seems like you can always put a time limit on something. how much time to get to the next galaxy, and they have a guesstimation of that, you know. But you know, going places and stuff, like when you don't have the universe as an ending, you know, is kind of a weird loop-de-doo of trying to accept. Like, so how long does it take to get to the end?
Yeah.
Can't.
Right.
There's no way you can't. You've got to be able to do that. I mean, what do you mean you can't? You can't get to the end of you can't see what's at the end of the block?
So oh my gosh. This, again, it kind of blows my mind to be thinking about these sort of things because there's so many like contradictory parts that like, you know, I have this logical scaffold in my brain, and this goes outside of that.
Right.
There's nothing
because you can't have an ending. If you did have an ending to the universe, well, then that's it. You can't have an ending without a beginning because guess what? Now you got a beginning on the other side of that wall. That's the end of the universe, right? Oh, well, there is that. Well, there's the end of the universe. Oh, see, there's something else.
So go back to what is time? How would you describe time?
It's unfortunately for me, I have to think of it as my life and what I might have left. I use my time as
it's a hard thing to
specific increments of my life. You could break it down into days or seconds, but for me, it's just specific increments of my life. It's not a place or a void. I don't know. It's hard.
Isn't it hard?
Yeah, because you know, you listen to some talk of black holes, and there was also talk recently about if two black holes collide, is that potential of creating time or doing something with time too? And I'm like, it's above me, you know, for sure, but. That's partly why I am intrigued of looking into it, but I don't know. I
agree.
That's above my pay grade.
It's so hard to describe what time is. In general, we think of time as a sequential thing, right? It's events that happen in a sequential order, and it continues to grow. And your point about there had to have been a beginning and there needs to be an end.
Because they have to have a scale.
Well, because, you know, humans sort of created this concept of time, right? It's part of our vocabulary. And we look at time from sort of the human existence of, even sometimes if we look at it as ourselves, right? We were born, so we didn't exist before. We were born. At some point, we're going to die. And, you know, those of us who are not religious believe that we don't exist after. So our existence is between this period of time. Who was it? It might have been Ricky Gervais who said something about, you know, people give him the question of, so if you don't believe in heaven, then aren't you afraid of dying? And he says, well, he says something about, well, were you afraid before you were born? Well, no, because you didn't exist. And he says, exactly. That's the way I look at death, is that I don't I'm not concerned about it because I didn't exist before I was born, and it didn't bother me then.
Well,
right?
It's easy to say,
Right?
but how about this? I'm not bashful to say I get concerned of not existing.
Well, we talked about this.
So
about
I
aging.
get concerned of not being able to experience other things, other times.
Sure.
That's continued to go on. Supposedly, or actually, this is my show, people, and when I die, you guys are all out of there. The TV's off. You guys don't play anymore down this timeline.
Well,
but
we had, I can't remember what podcast we talked about. We were talking about getting older. Maybe it hasn't aired yet. I don't know. But we talked about us sort of becoming our parents and getting older, and the fear of getting old. And it's a human emotion, of course. And it's funny how Ricky Gervais talks about this sort of idea that I didn't care about not existing before I was born. I have the same perception of after. Again, it goes back to us defining time as this period of sequential events, right? Scientists, they talk about space and time, and Einstein talked about space-time. And I don't fully get that, because I look at space and time, and you look at space as sort of like a location, right?
But we're also judging time from, like, is it as if Earth is the hub is the central location?
I think Einstein's
theory... Because what if there is no time? We just base time because of our lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there is no time outside of, because there is no beginning or ending. There is no time that exists. There's no old or young, because it's never not existed, and it will never get too old to die. It will always, and it won't grow because it's infinite.
So your brain's going in overload, right?
I mean, I'm trying to. It's so crazy because right when it starts going to overload, you almost get crystal clear, and then it gets overloaded, and then it goes
That's the logical part in our brain where we kind of get to the edge and we go, oh no, and we have to go back to what we know and are comfortable with. Do you remember the show Growing Pains?
Yeah.
So, and I don't know why this just popped in my head. There was an episode long time ago, and what's his name? Mike Seaver. That was
his dad?
No, it was the kid. I thought his name was Mike.
Oh, maybe it is Mike Seaver. Yeah.
Gosh dang it!
Yeah.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, it is.
So
Mike. Yep.
So there's this episode where I think he stayed home from school or something, and the episode was the story basically was that he didn't realize that the rest of life continued on without him. Right? See, he stayed home and wasn't a part of all of the things that he normally does throughout his normal day. And he kind of was like, his sister had to bring to his attention, life does continue without you.
That Christmas tree will still look beautiful without one less bulb.
Yeah. And it just makes me think about how I don't want to say self-centered isn't the right word, but our perspective of everything is really from our own existence, right? Our perspective, our brain processing all this stuff that's going on around us. And so our sense of time is relative to us. And so Einstein has this theory of relativity where it kind of talks about space and time being relative to where we are at this moment.
Right.
There's this it's a show, I think I actually might have picked it up on YouTube. And I don't remember where it was from, but it had this guy, Ronald Millett, and it described if Einstein was in a rocket ship and he's traveling in a certain direction, and he's got a brother, and I can't remember what they named his brother, but they're in two rocket ships, and Einstein has light beams on the front of his rocket ship, and he turns those beams on, and light moves away from where he's at, goes out into space. That speed is light speed. And he says, okay, so his brother in the rocket ship next to him takes off out in front of him, and then Einstein turns the light on, and that light zooms on by him. And the idea is that because Einstein's brother is going super fast, basically light speed in one direction, when the light is turned on, his brother sees it at light speed going by him, like immediately. Sees it at light speed because light speed is relative to the person observing it.
Yeah.
Okay, kind of blows your mind a little bit. But Einstein, who turned on the lights, and his brother taking off, his perception of those things are going at the same speed, perception of it, light speed. But the perception of his brother saw the light zoom by at light speed, as if he were standing still.
Yeah.
That's sort of the relativity part, right?
Right.
It's based on who's observing it at where they're at. That concept blows my mind because it's not a universal light speed is this speed, and if you're going that speed, then it's like two trains, keeping up with each other. Light speed, boom, right by you, as if you were standing still. It blows my mind. I don't fully understand how that is a possibility. But Einstein, super bright guy, did all this. Now, with that being said, all of these people who are theoretical physicists who study this kind of stuff, so they're theoretical. How do they come up with these things? What tools do they use?
LSD.
That would make sense.
Like, Dave, you got 72 hours. You need to come up with something. I'm like, oh, crap. Where do I get some LSD? All right. Oh, man, I got some stuff for you.
Yeah. Well, because it's mind-blowing. It doesn't make sense.
That's what I mean is it's warping.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because it's real stuff. It's like space and time is real, and it's you would think that we should be able to contemplate it or
comprehend it.
Thank you.
So the theoretical physicists, they're using mathematics and I don't know what other tools to test whether these things could be true. Okay, and then there's the other side, which is I think they're called the experimental physicists, where they're physicists, but they actually do real experiments to determine. It's like more traditional type experimentation, right? Where you're coming up with your hypothesis and then you use things to test it,
right? To see if it's true.
Here's an example. Have you heard? Oh gosh, Ethan, maybe you can look up CERN, the particle collider.
Boy, okay. I have heard.
Have you heard about this? I think that's what it's called. So, and I don't know where it's at. Ethan, you can probably figure out where it's at. But they have this massive thing. We're talking miles and miles long, and it's a particle collider. They send particles in opposite directions on a specific trajectory, and what they do is they collide these things. There it is.
Oh, yes, I have.
And what's interesting
is bad news.
Well, and what's interesting, I don't know everything about it, but what's interesting about it is that these are these experimental physicists who are actually doing these things and measuring the results of these experiments. And what they're finding is there are theoretical and experimental physicists who come to the same conclusions.